Hello and welcome to the Stack Magazine's podcast. My name is Stephen Watson and I run Stack, the subscription club that delivers a different independent magazine to your door every month. Every now and then, I'm asked by somebody from outside the independent magazine world for some kind of proof. They want me to point to a magazine that is really successful, like, maybe they've heard of it and it seems to be going from strength to strength. And for more than a decade, I've been saying The Gentlewoman. I think my mind goes to it partly because it has big name celebrities on the cover, but not always, and we might come to that. It has big brands advertising inside, and it's all built on this very particular sensibility and approach to discussing the fashion industry that's been honed over the years. So I'm very pleased to be joined today by its editor-in-chief, Penny Martin. Penny, thank you for making time to talk.
Hi, Steve. It's very nice to see you.
So after that great big introduction about The Gentlewoman, I don't want to talk about that now. We've got other stuff to talk about. So we'll come to The Gentlewoman. But the thing that made me want to organise this call is you recently sent me this other thing called 1995, beautiful pink publication. So what on earth is this? What's going on with this?
It is an additional, well, it looks like a magazine, doesn't it? But it's a one-off publication. So what's that called? Is that a book? Is that a magalog? What is it? It's a publication, which we have done in partnership with Bicester Village, the shopping destination that's in Oxfordshire. They are celebrating their 30th anniversary this year and came to us, I think at the end of last year, end of 2024, and said that they would love to do something. And I was intrigued at the prospect of perhaps doing something additional to the magazine, which we had been experimenting with last season. But also I was really intrigued by their anniversary, particularly in that it was 30 years. And I'm fascinated with the year 1995. So that's what you're holding.
You get a lot of mileage out of both 1995 and 30th anniversary.
Well, we get a lot of mileage out of any subject, don't we, Stephen? We're nothing if we're not specific. But yeah, that's true. I was trying to think about what the difference in the process was, anticipating what your question might be. And yeah, it's been an opportunity to be extremely granular and really interrogate the idea of 30 and 1995 a lot. So yeah, it's a magazine that is, I guess, uses, rather than profiles or a cover star, as in the way that you might do with a woman's periodical, and instead use the other thing one of the other things that we do quite a lot in the magazine, which is oral history. And we create a kind of formula around a group interview, around a subject. So we started by doing the kind of chronicling the life and times of Bicester Village itself. And then that started to kind of grow arms and legs. So it's it leads with the oral history and then it goes into other parts.
So I have to put my hand in the air and say I didn't really know what Bicester Village was before. I definitely heard of it, but wasn't really aware of what it was. So you have this oral history of Bicester Village and how the whole thing came about. So
it's an outlet village. It's an outlet destination. And I think a lot of people, well, in our kind of world, got very interested in it around the time that Celine opened a store there. But actually, its 30 years have been very interesting. And it's now, I think for Chinese tourists, it's the second most visited destination in the UK after Buckingham Palace. It's incredible. They get 7.2 million visitors a year. It's massive. And to the extent that they opened their own dedicated train station there. And it's just under an hour from central London, from Marylebone Station. So those were the things that became the pillars of the magazine. It was travel. It was their amazing shopping. And they do have incredible shopping. It's not knockdown retail. It's very aspirational and quite often it's things that are straight, the things that appeared on the catwalk. People get unusual items there. And it's all done extremely well. They have incredible service, another pillar of the magazine about those members of staff that actually work there. That was all fascinating. And of course, it all chimed with the Gentlewoman's interest in those things like fashion and service and shopping and all those things. But for me, I was also interested in the idea that the Gentlewoman could kind of train its point of view on another aspect of this year, which of course is going to be this kind of oasis summer in the kind of mid-90s kind of opportunity for a really kind of retro, blokey experience that we're going to see in the media this summer. And I knew that wasn't, I'm old enough to remember that wasn't true of that year. You might think it's all about the Gallagher brothers, but in fact, Bjork was at the centre of everything in 1995, and PJ Harvey and Shirley Manson and all these really interesting women that went on to sort of seed and then execute these incredible big ideas that continued to shape the culture. But, the prospect of this summer's kind of retro throwback, so miserable that it was great to kind of create a kind of more women-centred media. So that was my secret agenda. And of course, we were able to do that with all the kind of classic bits of marginalia that the magazine loves, which are all these lists of asking people, what were you doing in 1995? And of course, it's a great opportunity for us because it meant that we could ask men and not just women. Usually when we're setting out on a kind of editorial project, you're looking at 50% of the population, whereas for once we were able to have people like Helmut Lang and Simone Bellatini from Bali, and now Jill Sander, and all these other people that usually we wouldn't include. So that was quite fun. We even photographed men in this magazine.
Get away. I love the way that you do that magazine-y thing of like taking something and just very quickly explaining like, this is what this is and this is why you should care about it. And then, as you say, like you use all your little kind of magazine trickery of like, this sort of like, what are they called? It's like a sort of almanac at the end of like...
Yeah, marginalia. Yeah,
right.
That's exactly what it is, yeah. And which you would expect to have seen in like a 19th century one-off magazine, but that wasn't periodical. Those one-off publications that were produced a bit like kind of yearbooks, I guess. And that is the language and furniture you'd expect to see in those kind of gentlemen's gazettes. So yeah, we've mined those shamelessly over the years. And of course you've got things like, I don't know, the horoscope for 1995 for Bicester, but also in 30 years time, the horoscope for Bicester, although, Susan Miller wrote that, or Venn diagrams, or all the sort of funny things that are super dry to the point of being slightly hysterical.
I love it. I love it.
And, also an opportunity to ask our favourite contributors to write think pieces about fashion, their experience in 1995 or in magazine making or fashion photography. And that's an opportunity to sort of revisit imagery with a slightly different focus and selection than you usually expect. So yeah, no, it was really fun. I don't know, the team were super pleased to be doing an extra publication when we first thought of doing it, but really it was was the big takeaway was we did have the capacity to do it. We'd worked previously on a publication last autumn called Retrospect, which was, I don't know if you're familiar with the beauty brand Merit. They were just launching a fragrance in Europe, but they're the second biggest beauty brand in Sephora in North America. So we were excited to work with them just because it was a different market. But that was a magazine about a fragrance launch. Their fragrance was called Retrospect. But we did a magazine that was about smell and memory and the kind of science of why those two things are thought to be connected. So it was a kind of classic slight sidestep of an editorial idea. And, with 1995, it was our anniversary. But if you think about it, those are two important components that on which our industry runs, is anniversaries and product launches. It was just an opportunity to give them a little bit deeper thinking, I guess.
Sure. So how does a project like this come about then? Like, how long is it in the making, and
I probably shouldn't answer that honestly, because these were done quite quickly and I don't want to put up our flag to say, yeah, we're going to turn around these in a few months. But we did. I think in retrospect, that was, yeah, each of them were about 4 months or something. But, it would be great to have a bit longer than that to do them. But yeah, they were done in about a season.
Right.
And they were able to be done sort of slightly staggered between the magazine production of the Gentlewoman issue 30 and 31, I guess.
And so is this a function of, because obviously you've got lots of advertising in the magazine, the people at Bicester Village may be coming to you in the first place talking about advertising, and then you realise it deserves something else, or it's a totally different approach?
Neither one were advertising. They were brands that came to us interested in doing one-off projects because that's not where they put their marketing budgets, or don't with biannual publications like ourselves. But yes, that would be how it would function traditionally with magazines that run departments that are making what's known as white label. Neither of these are white label projects in that our name is on them, and we were happy, for that to be the case. But, many of our pure magazines will have an additional office and they'll be making these for department stores and whoever knows else. I think it's important that the brand chimes with the kind of things we're interested in writing about or developing concepts for, because it's a huge amount of investment to make a kind of one-off magazine. You're, giving away ideas and a framework that, other organizations would hope you could start running as a periodical in order to make your money back, make your investment back in terms of kind of running on several issues, beyond the original one. But I think that's just the way we work, over delivering on often a very simple ask, just to kind of satisfy our own editorial greed.
I love it. So, I mean, because reading the magazine, you're right. This feels like it's not just that this is a customer magazine made by the Gentlewoman. This is very much a Gentlewoman product. It's it's kind of like, it's got the very similar look and feel. You ran the Gentlewoman Club, I think. You went out to Bicester Village. So it feels like the whole thing is so much more enmeshed and almost like, I don't know, it kind of feels warmer.
Well, in terms of the 1995 project, that the success of its real world marketing and the celebration on May Day, we were up at Bicester with our Gentlewoman Club, cutting the ribbon literally, and having a sensational lunch and then a big shopping event. That was a consequence of Bicester being extraordinarily equipped. Their marketing department's unbelievable, to do something that, was beyond our wildest dreams in terms of the sort of 360 of a launch. You hope for that every time you make a magazine, that there's going to be one of your supporters or advertisers that wants to do that kind of, create that kind of hoopla around it. It was fantastic. And the way that they execute their marketing up there is such high quality.
This doesn't look and feel like a customer publishing project. It feels like it's very much part of the Gentlewoman.
Well, I'm glad that that's the case, and I choose to believe that you're talking about it's incredible printing and it's the kind of contributors that have contributed to it, because you don't expect your team to want to work on sidebar projects. You beg favors from them for your editorial content of your magazine, and those other projects. If you look at our peer publications, often there's a kind of B or C team working on their supported or commercial projects. One that really reset around the time of the lockdown, where you saw that kind of economy of kind of A and B changing in other publications. I guess we've established an enormously long relationships and deep relationships with our contributors that we can have extraordinary fashion photographers working on those additional projects. But I would say that there's a slightly different language in these publications where we're speaking to a slightly different market. 1995 has a very 90s, slightly more popular. Would you call it populist? I think that's a negative word, isn't it, when you associate it with politics? Language running through it. And I'm quite excited about that we could create something that's not a sort of a child of the Gentlewoman, but it's a kind of side project and doing something slightly different. So I totally accept that it's got our kind of, well, I like to think I agree with you that it's got our standards, but I think maybe it's, there's different typefaces and a kind of slightly glossier sensibility, and perhaps that is a clue to what will be coming right across the Gentlewoman, because in fact we've been working with a new design director on 1995. Tom Etherington has joined us, who previously designed The Happy Reader, which was one of the publications. I didn't work on that, but that was also produced by our company with Penguin Classics. And I'm excited that some of that kind of verve and bounce is going to come to the magazine and perhaps be reflected in our digital applications too.
Totally. I saw on Tom's Instagram that this pink is apparently, it's the bright, so it says it was custom made for the magazine, brighter than any off-the-shelf pink that is light fast. That's dedication. That's attention to detail, right?
yeah, that's definitely it is. And typefaces and whatnot. There's been a lot of love showered on it, that's for sure.
So Tom is now working across the Gentlewoman as well. I noticed that his name wasn't on the masthead for this one. So is this?
That's right. He won't really see his hand on the Gentlewoman until issue 32, which will be out in September.
Okay, all right. So we've moved over to the Gentlewoman now. You have Greta Lee on the cover of this one, who just feels like perfect Gentlewoman material, in that like she's mega famous, but I sort of don't really know that much about her. I feel like I'm gonna like learn something here. So tell me the process. Like when you're out trying to get a cover, how do you do that? How do you get Greta Lee?
I think we were talking to her publicist maybe for like 4 or 5 seasons. It has to have been. It would have been around the time that Past Lives was coming. I think one of my colleagues saw a screener. So we knew we were interested in it before. And then, of course, it became Oscar nominated, didn't it? But around that time, I'd noticed her cropping up as the one you remembered from Russian Doll or from The Saturday Show. And there was just something really quite sharp and sparky about her. We never managed to make it happen until now. And it nearly didn't happen because we were shooting it in California, in Los Angeles, on the day that the fires really escalated out of control. So that one had to be moved to New York. It was all nail-biting stuff. It nearly wasn't on the cover. And it was really exciting to work with also the fact that she was a Loewe ambassador, and it was Jonathan Anderson's last collection at Loewe. So the stars aligned, and it was nice to have a very fashion cover, I think. A lot of skin. No, she's worked really well for us. I think a lot of people have said similar things to what you've said, that they felt she was so Gentlewoman.
Totally. Well, and you've got her at this point where she's able to, like, she still seems very in touch with the days when she wasn't getting parts and was missing out on things. And now she's at this opposite extreme of just like actually can't do the things that are in front of her. So yeah, it feels like a nice sort of transitional time.
Yeah, in the time we were working with her, I think she went back and forth from kind of New York to Los Angeles. She was in Canada and back. I think she's working every day, God sends, at the moment.
Yeah. And then in like this beautiful microcosm of the Gentlewoman, we run from Greta Lee straight into a photo story about butter, which is beautifully written by Seb Emina. Tell me, is that Seb coming to you going, I want to write about butter, or is it the photographer, or how does that go?
I think it was our fashion director that showed me something he'd seen about butter. But you got to say that Seb has been working for years setting himself up to be the man that would write it. There's only one man that would go into rhapsodies about the difference between salted and unsalted goat's butter, whatever it is that's in there. So that was a fun one that we were very eager to make work. And God, those that food stylist and that photographer were very patient with us, because there was a lot of opinions on how that should appear. No, I'm really pleased with that. I think that's one of my favourite things too.
Yeah. So am I right in saying that you're up in Scotland at the moment?
Yeah, I'm speaking to you. I'm looking out across the Firth of Forth, where there were orcas spotted yesterday.
Wow, no way. I'm looking out over the rooftops of Kilburn. I don't think we've had any orcas, but still.
Sharks,
So
definitely.
was that a pandemic thing? When did you go back up to Scotland?
I had my husband and I bought a little place here in 2018 and stayed here during the lockdown, and it soon became clear that we weren't going back. So we sold up in Ealing, where we were living, and I kind of shuttle between London and Cellardyke, where I live. Um,
And how does that affect the magazine making process? Does it affect it?
I'm sure it does. For bad and for good. It means that when I'm in the office, it's very concentrated, probably a couple of times a month. And obviously, it really depends what time of the year you're talking to me about, whether that's relevant or not. For months go by, and it's more about my being in Europe. For the fashion shows or selling ads or whatever. And then around about now, when we're kind of really locking the issue down, there's a lot of virtual communication, but you've got a fashion director that's out of the office, and yeah, Tom's in Sheffield. It is just now a reality. But we have very lovely offices also in Cromwell Place in South Kensington. So it's the best of both worlds.
Look at you. Oh, so am I right in saying it's 15 years this year of the Gentlewoman?
You are, yes.
15 years. Okay, so there must have been some pretty big changes in that time. Like when you look back over what you've been doing in that time, can you put your finger on any bits where you're like, okay, that was a real change?
Gosh. I think with independent publishing that starts from scratch, or you've seen its kind of lifetime, you see the people that made it maturing, and with any luck, you get better at making the magazine, but that's not always a good thing. So often it's about choosing to keep a kind of degree of strangeness or charm or kind of amateur, conscious amateurism, whereupon once that was inadvertent and now it's intentional. So there's a kind of, you can see, a kind of that in terms of the development of the tone. So you're sort of seeing a kind of portrait of the people that are making it and how they're changing. And then if you think about the 15 years that we're talking about, a lot of things have changed in the world around it, and you see the magazine responding to those things. So of course, everybody wants to now pretend that they were on the right side of everything all the way along. But I'm sure our magazine is much more diverse than it was when it first started. And Black Lives Matter taught us all a lesson, and I'm not going to be a hypocrite about that. I'm glad if we have made those changes, and I'm sure we haven't gone even far enough yet. And you try and drag the industry with you. So it's politics to some extent, and then I don't think the editorial aim has changed, but I think the tone changes as you get better at making the magazine. I don't know. I don't know. Does that chime with you?
Oh, look, I mean, I think like this magazine obviously has been so. I suppose the brilliant thing about the Gentlewoman is that it just feels so effortless all the time. So, kind of is I feel like it's sort of like the swan kind of like, swimming across the lake, where I'm sure you're all like, kind of madly trying to like sort of patch something up because the wildfires in California, and that means that you might not have a cover shoot, and then there's mega stress.
Somebody we've been working with for 2 months dropped out today. It happens all the time, and then you've been shaping the editorial diet around that space, and then suddenly you've got a kind of X-ray of a editorial formula. That those things are just like a daily occurrence.
That just comes with the territory. Okay, so we're at this point, 15 years. Are you doing anything to celebrate 15 years, or is that not really a thing?
Well, we're not. We're 31 this issue, so I think we probably celebrate. Did we celebrate being 30? No, I think no.
15 years, whatever. Like, okay, so
maybe we should.
In that case, do you have an eye to, I don't know, the next 15 years, the next 5 years, the next 1 year? Like, when you're thinking about the magazine, what kind of horizons do you work to?
Well, as I said, sometimes you have supporters that want to make an event around the launch of an issue. But, you've put a thought in my head. I mean, the year isn't out yet. Maybe we should make a big deal out of September because, I remember a very accomplished and desirable brand once saying when I told them we had a major anniversary come up, and they said, "Oh well, we don't celebrate anniversaries." Well, you're well over 150 years old. I'm sure you don't. But if you're in an independent publishing, you would, because every issue is a miracle.
Totally. Well, it's nice to hear that even for you. I mean, it's not nice to hear. I don't want to feel that it's a miracle every time, but even for someone who is as accomplished as you are, it still feels like that. It still feels you're just sort of like somehow making it happen each time.
Yeah, I don't know why it never gets any easier, but it doesn't. But I think that's a kind of choice, isn't it? You want to kind of feel like it's a high stakes enterprise. You never want to get bored of it or kind of complacent, because you can definitely see in your peer publications who has.
Totally, 100%. I don't want to kind of pick into who you're talking about. Penny, thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Thank you.
It's lovely to speak with you as always.
A pleasure. Thank you.